Hi guys, it's Jay. Welcome back to the channel. Kelly and I wanted to share another board and batten wall that we did in our nursery. For supplies on this wall, we used paint, MDF boards, level, a brad nailer, a miter saw, a combination square, wood filler, sandpaper, caulk, and painter's tape. Here are a few pictures of the walls prior to us going in there and doing any work. We were using lighter colors, so we decided to prime the walls prior to applying the paint. And here's a short video of the walls after the initial primer was placed on the walls prior to installing the board and batten wall. After priming the walls, we painted the walls in the room. The main accent wall here, we used the light teal color, and the other three walls in the room were painted in off-white, eggshell white. You can see here that on the far left and far right, the horizontal MDF boards have been applied as close to the wall as possible using a brad nailer and the MDF boards of our choice. On this section of the video here, I'm using a stud finder and painter's tape to label all of the studs on the wall. Next, I will use the brad nailer to apply the lower portion of the border of the MDF board. And lastly, I'll apply the upper horizontal border of the MDF board with the brad nailer. It's very important that you measure this appropriately and get it to fit as snugly as possible. Next, we use a laser level to approximate where the diagonal MDF board should intercept the upper and lower MDF borders. This isn't an exact science, it's more of a preference situation. As you can see, it took a few trials with the laser level to get it where we desired for it to be, and then we used a measuring tape and a pencil to mark on the board where that position was. And lastly, we used the measuring tape to measure how long that MDF board should be. Here, we're cutting the MDF board with the miter saw, ensuring that we have some safety goggles on. And after the MDF board is cut, we then take it back upstairs, get it as close to the location that we marked previously on the MDF boards, and then use the brad nailer to put it into place. It's very important that you get it as flush as possible on the upper and lower borders, and you have no buckling on the MDF board. After a few trial runs and it's in its final position, we use the brad nailer here to secure it to the wall. Here's an image after the initial diagonal MDF board has been put into place on the wall. Next, we move to the lower portion of the initial diagonal MDF board. We measured from the bottom of the diagonal MDF board to the bottom of the base and decided that we wanted 4 MDF boards in this direction. Here, after trial and error, being sure to sand down all of the edges, we applied the 4 MDF boards on the bottom portion of the initial diagonal MDF board. In this step, it's very vital that you ensure that the lower diagonal MDF boards are at a 90-degree angle with the initial MDF board so that the lines are straight and that the edges are even and smooth so that it's flush up against the initial MDF board and the wall. When using the brad nailer, I tried to place the nails in the MDF board in line with the painter's tape of where the studs were present. Here's an image after the initial 2, 3, and 4 MDF boards were put into place. In applying these last 2 diagonal MDF boards in this section, in order to keep them 4 inches apart throughout, I cut 2 pieces of MDF board exactly 4 inches, and then I placed them in between those 2 MDF boards on the wall to ensure that they were spaced 4 inches apart the entire time. We then follow the same steps to place the upper 3 diagonal MDF boards in line with the initial MDF board placed on the wall. Here are images of those after they have been put into place. Lastly, we move to the upper portion of the initial MDF board. Use the same steps to apply the remainder of the diagonal MDF boards. Here's an image after all of our MDF boards have been applied to the wall using the brad nailer. This next step includes using wood filler to fill all of the small holes created by the brad nailer. After filling them with a very small amount of wood filler, we allowed them to dry for 8 hours, and then we proceeded to sand away any excess wood filler from each of the individual spots. Here's an image of the wall after the wood filler has been allowed to dry and sanded appropriately. Next, we caulked all of the edges of the MDF board as well as the edges of the border of the MDF board on the wall. This really gives you a professional finish, and you don't have to use a lot of caulk to make this process work. I highly suggest using a damp towel to dampen your finger as you apply the caulk and smooth it out in each of the creases. Caulking is a very important step that really gives your look a professional touch. Here's an image of the wall after we've allowed the caulk to dry for 24 hours. And we actually used fast drying caulk, and we didn't have to wait that long, but we did just to be sure. In this next step, we took a damp cloth and wiped down the entire surface of the wall prior to painting to remove any excess debris, wood filler, and or caulk that may have been left on the wall after it dried. Here we applied painter's tape to the outer border of the newly installed board and batting wall prior to painting the new MDF boards. Lastly, we added a final coat of paint to the newly installed board and batting wall and touched up any areas on the wall that needed touching up. This wall came out great. We really love it, and we hope that our baby girl will love it as well. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to our page, and stay tuned for future videos as we illustrate how we proceeded to decorate our daughter's nursery. Thank you for watching.